So I guess we can start off with introducing ourselves. I'll go first. So my name is Solana, and I am a sophomore right now. And I decided, well, I wanted to participate in this event because I'm half Japanese and half American, and I spend like maybe a fourth of my year in Japan, like summer and winter break. But the rest of the time I live in Hawaii. And so it's like, for me, it's just interesting to learn about other people's perspectives. And also, it's like racial identity and stuff like that is like pretty relevant in my life. And I think it's like relevant in everyone's life. So that's why I wanted to learn about other people's thoughts. I can just maybe I'll choose one person and that person will choose the next person and so on and so forth. Um, so what about Misa? Do you want to go?
Hi, I'm Misa. I'm a freshman and I wanted to join this because, like Solana, I'm mostly in Hawaii, but I was born in Japan and I try to go back every year. So it's nice to see and hear things from all over the place. And I wanted to hear what other people my age are going through, I guess. Kay?
Thank you. My name's Kay. I'm a junior. I'm in 11th grade. I'm gonna go into 12th this summer. I live in Japan. I go to international school in Japan. And I wanted to join this meeting or this discussion because I think it's absolutely a crucial topic to modern society and society in general to be able to talk about race and, well, all the identity that comes with race and how we should be approaching the topic of race. Especially, I think from Japan, I see a lot of news about racial issues when it comes to America, but then I think Japan has a lot of issues as well, and I think it's really important to just talk. That's where every resolution begins, and I think that's why I wanted to join, to help come up with something. So Tanishka, can you go next?
Okay, hi, my name is Tanishka. I am 16 right now, and according to Japanese standards, I am a junior. I just started 11th grade this month. So I'm from India, but I was born in India, but I have spent my entire life in Japan. So, well, there's a big part of me that feels very Japanese, if you know what I mean. And I was invited to this panel by Kay. We go to the same school here in Osaka. Yeah, and I guess I watched the YouTube video from the last panel you guys had, and I thought it was really interesting to see you guys speak so openly about your opinions. And I mean, I always love talking with people who have strong opinions about important topics like this. So I'm really excited to see what all of you guys have to say and what I can say, how I can contribute. Yeah, so I'm very excited for today. Thank you. Elilaya, did I pronounce that right?
Yeah, Alilai. So I'm Alilai. I am 16. I'm in 10th grade, so a sophomore here, and I live in Hawaii. I was born in Hawaii, but I've kind of been raised, I'd say, all over. I lived in Germany for a while, and my parents are born and raised in Germany, so I speak German, and I think a big part of me is German too, just because all my family lives there besides my family. And I've also lived on the mainland, but I'd say majority of my life I've lived here in Hawaii. I think the main reason why I wanted to be part of this is just, a lot of people have already said this, but just I think it's very crucial to talk with people our age about these current world issues. And I notice in certain classes in school I'm already doing that, but I think to be able to connect with people all around the world, that's just a whole nother level. And I'm just interested to both share and listen. How about Ikumi?
I'm Ikumi, and I was born and brought up in Japan. My parents are both Japanese, and I have never lived abroad, so my English isn't good, and I can speak only English a little bit. So I thought that I would like to just listen what everyone thinks about race. Also, I want to have a good experience through this conversation with people who have different thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Taisei, can you do your introduction? Are you there, Taisei? Okay. Okay, then we can just maybe go back to Taisei when he is here. So, maybe a good question to start off our discussion with is, what do you think your race is? So does anyone want to, and I think, yeah, like maybe race / nationality, what that is. So does anyone want to start off sharing? Okay, you can take it away.
Okay, so my nationality is American and Japanese. My mother's American and my dad's Japanese. And I was raised in Japan, so a lot of me just considers myself Japanese. But then a lot of the time when I'm in Japan, because I can speak English and because I guess I look a bit different maybe, I do feel like I am, it's like I definitely feel like I am American. Some part of me is definitely American. And it's kind of hard because I'm both at the same time, I feel like. I don't have one clear race, but yeah, that's how I feel about who I am. But when I'm in Japan, I feel more American, and when I'm in America, because I come from Japan, and if I tell people I'm from Japan, I'll definitely be seen as a Japanese person instead of a Japanese American person.
Okay, I'll go. So, by nationality, I am full German, but I've spent so much of my life in Hawaii that I think just part of the culture has just like become a part of me, and I do so many things that I would say any person that is born and raised in Hawaii does too. So although by ethnicity I'm German, and when I'm in Germany, nobody would ask me otherwise because I do speak the language, and nobody'd be like, oh, you live somewhere else. Maybe a part of my language they could tell just because I don't go to school there. So if you have a deeper conversation with me, it's not quite as grammatical as another conversation I'd have if I'd be in the school system there. But I think in my heart, I guess part of my race is, I wouldn't say Hawaiian, but just like having lived in Hawaii, it's just become a big part of me and a big part of who I identify as. That's like what I enjoy people telling about is, I guess also the people and the culture that I'm surrounded by here. So, and I think there are such different topics like nationality versus race, and just like identity versus nationality, because nationality is kind of, you know, more of like ethnicity you're born into, and then I'd say that race is more of what you personally identify as.
Okay, I'll go next. But first of all, I just wanted to say I completely agree with what you just said. I mean, for me, it would be between, India and Japan, but I completely understand what you mean. Like, by nationality, I am Indian. Both of my parents are from India. I was born in India too, but I have spent my entire life in Japan. Like, ever since I could talk, ever since I could walk, everything I would see has been in Japan. My entire environment growing up has been in Japan. So when people have, like you said, a deep conversation with me, like if you properly talk to me, then most people in Japan just say, oh, you're basically Japanese. And, that sounds weird, but I get what they mean. Like inside, everything I've gone through has been in Japan with the Japanese environment. So I kind of consider myself like Indian coded, if you know what I mean. Like I look Indian and people can see that I'm not Japanese, like by nationality, by race. But when you talk to me, it's not always like that. Like I can speak language. I speak Hindi as well, other than Japanese and English. So when I go back to India, I can talk to a lot of people. But then again, in India, there are so many languages. So speaking one language doesn't mean you can communicate with everyone. I guess in a way that gives me an advantage because people won't be able to tell that I can't speak anything else in India. Yeah, so for me, it's between India and Japan, but I like to think that I have, different attributes that make me Indian and attributes that make me Japanese as well. Yeah.
I'll go, okay. So if I were to write on like a forum or if people ask me, I would say that I'm fully Japanese because I was born in Japan and I lived there for 5 years. And I kind of got like the living in Japan experience, but most of my life I've lived in Hawaii. So I wouldn't say I'm fully Japanese, but I can't say that I'm fully like Hawaiian or American because, well, I don't look like them at all. And at home, it's kind of like Japan because my mom and my sister, we all try and speak Japanese and we eat Japanese food and we practice Japanese culture things. But if I go to Japan and people ask me stuff, I wouldn't know what they're talking about and I wouldn't like be able to, I guess, be a tour guide if we were to go to Japan. So in that sense, I'm not, I guess, Japanese enough. And so I would say I'm like Hapa, Hawaiian and Japanese, kind of.
Okay, I'll go. So I would say that like Kay said, when I'm in Japan, I feel more American, but then when I'm in Hawaii, then I feel more Japanese. But even I think like Hawaii and America are so different that it's kind of like I don't really go to the mainland much. And so to be honest, like I don't really know too much what American culture is like. I know what like local Hawaiian culture is like, but so that like for that reason I can't really say that I'm full American because I'm rather just like a person living in Hawaii. But I also can't say that I'm like local to Hawaii either because I've just never really felt integrated in that culture. And like it's not even just because it's like such a mix of so many different cultures. But I think race is a really hard one because like when you have a standard test or something, they ask you to fill in like, oh, what's your race? And there's like bubble like, oh, are you white? Are you, African American? Like what is it? And it's like I usually just put other because I don't think I'm really like Asian or white. I'm just both. So that's kind of my take on it.
In the meantime, may I ask another question?
Yes, of course, please do.
When Misa was talking about her experience, you said something about not feeling Japanese enough. And I feel like that's such an important like part about being multicultural or like multiracial, like internally or like actually. But do you guys ever feel like you're not something enough? Because I definitely feel like I'm not Indian enough sometimes. If you guys have any opinions on that, I would love to hear it.
I definitely don't. A lot of things I don't understand about Japan. There are like a lot of cultural aspects. Like I've taken history class, but I don't understand the full Japanese history of everything and why things are the way they are, I don't understand that completely. I don't feel like I'm completely Japanese, but that's partially because I'm really interested in America. For college, personally, I'm interested in America, but then I don't know a lot of American history. I haven't taken American history, so I definitely don't think I'm American enough a lot of the times. Yeah, definitely. I would agree with that as well.
I'll speak my personal opinion on that. So my parents are born and raised in Germany. However, I'm raised in Hawaii. So I think oftentimes when I have a conversation, for example, with my mom about something that's going on in my life, for example, it might just be a tiny thing. She often cannot understand where I'm coming from just because she was raised in such a different, I guess, culture as a teenager or even as a kid. And oftentimes, I guess that does make me wonder, like, I don't know, does this not make me part of that whole like German society just because I know my cousins in Germany are being raised the same way that she was being raised when she was younger, but I'm not, right? So that, and because my little family, my siblings and I are the only ones in our family that aren't raised in Germany, it always kind of makes us kind of like the odd ones out of the group. I don't feel like I'm somehow like not part of the family, but it does often like I'm not yeah, I guess sometimes I'm like, I don't know, am I quite as German as them just because I haven't lived much of my life there, and just the culture there when I go back, and like my friends too that I was there for part of first grade, and those friends that are now in 10th grade in high school, they just it's even kind of hard for me to connect with them sometimes just because it's almost like two different worlds basically.
I'm really glad you. Go ahead, Misa.
You can. I can relate to Alilai so much because my dad was actually went to school for a few years from I think elementary school for a bit, so I would be able to talk to him and he would be able to connect with me. But he passed away about almost 4 years ago, and so when I try to talk to my mom about like little things in life, or if I try to talk to my Japanese friends who I was friends with when I was 5, it's hard to connect with them and it's hard to be understood or heard. And so I would try to go to my friends at school here, but then again, they're not like Japanese, and so it's hard for them to understand. So sometimes I don't know where I can go to be understood or heard.
Well, I was just gonna say I was really glad you brought that up, Tanishka, because when you said, like, oh, I don't feel I'm Japanese enough, Misa, don't want to. I personally don't want to think that I'm not enough for something. But I definitely think that sometimes I do feel that way, and especially when I'm talking with like kids my age in Japan, especially like my cousins, like Alila, you said, when it comes to things like how you treat your elders, or like how how you're supposed, like, I feel like in Japan there's still a lot of like, okay, kids should be seen but not heard sort of mentality. And so in that sense, I feel like when I do voice my opinions like this, like people are like, oh, you're not really like that's like a very American aspect of you. And so then I feel like that's when I feel like, okay, maybe I'm not Japanese enough. But at the same time, like, I think that enough, like, I don't know, like, I wish that would kind of be like eliminated out of the top, like, out of the, like, it's an important topic to of course explore, but I wish it didn't, like, as a concept exist, because I think it definitely makes you kind of feel less about yourself. Taisei, do you want to just go ahead and share your introduction now that you're here?
Sorry I'm late. I was taking a shower because I had volleyball practice. So. My introduction. Wait. Whatever.
Yeah,
So
I can send the
I'm
timetable for you.
Taisei Nagasawa, and I live in Japan like right now, but I used to live in Hawaii for like 4.5 years, so I could speak a little bit of English. And I just wanna listen to like many kinds of opinions about race because I'm interested in those kind of stuff. And yeah, I just wanna hear and also say my opinions to you guys about race. Yeah, that's my introduction. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So does anyone else have any other questions that's like we want to ask each other that's not included in the chat? Because if not, I'll just go through that bullet list. So how would you like society and the world to become in the future as far as racial issues are concerned? That's a big question.
I think I'll go first. I think for the future, what's really important is that one of the issues regarding race, especially I think in America, is racism. To discriminate someone for being a certain race. They have no control over it, and yet they are blamed for being a certain race. And I think that is just absolutely wrong. But in terms of the concept of race, I think should be the point where we're starting to change as a society. Because, well, what race are you if you have a different nationality, but your parents have a different nationality, but you live in a certain country? Like, I think that what do you identify as? I think it's more easier to identify as just a certain nationality than it is to say race, because race is something we don't really have a control over, whereas nationality is, well, where do you live? What country did you love the most and you're going to live your life in? And I think the concept of race, to say that someone is a certain race, is something we should just take out of the equation, I think.
I would agree, Kay. I think, like you're saying, having like the power to choose rather than like it being assigned to you at birth is really important. And I think that, applies to a lot of things. But in terms of like nationality, I think that what's more important should be like your cultural identity, because I think that it's still important to, celebrate your culture and, share your experiences. And especially, when more people are becoming like as the world is becoming more connected, I think that it's just like the lines of race and nationality and stuff like that kind of become obsolete. And rather it's more just what are your experiences and what are your thoughts and what culture do you practice? Because, just because I'm Japanese American doesn't mean that I can't practice like a different culture. Well, I mean, then you have like issues of cultural appropriation and stuff, so I won't get into that. But I think that's like, it's the power to choose is, I think that's what's important.
One of the things that I heard some of my, teachers talking about in the past, they said that the concept of race just shouldn't exist, as a whole. But for me, when I think about it, I think the reason we think it shouldn't exist is because we know all the problems that are caused by it, right? We know that there's discrimination because of it. We know that there's like so much prejudice because of that concept. So in my honest opinion would be that race, it exists right now, and I think it should be allowed to exist. But as we notice that we all come from different backgrounds and different races, we just need to be more accepting of the fact. Like the first thought that, comes into people's heads shouldn't be the difference. Like it shouldn't be the discrimination that could possibly occur. It should be the fact that, in some way or another, we're all different, and that's literally what makes us all the same. I know this is getting like really deep and philosophical, but I just think that getting rid of the concept might not be the answer, but more just, learning how to accept that as something that we all will have. Because I agree that we should have, a choice in terms of nationality or what culture we want to belong to. But at the same time, there are, certain things that we are born with. There are certain things that we need to like respect up to a certain point. And I think it's okay to like keep that as long as society as a whole can learn to accept it. Yeah. So that's what I think.
Sorry, can I just respond to that? I 100% agree with you. But when I said we should get rid of race, I'm thinking of all the issues that come with it and sort of the discrimination that's involved. But I 100% agree that taking away race might not be the right answer. I'm not saying that taking away race is the one true way to go. That's one possibility I'm thinking of. But I think that for a lot of people, race is really strongly linked with who you are and what you identify as. And for some people, being a certain race and being proud to be a certain race is not a bad thing. For a lot of people, it doesn't come out in a negative way. And it gives that person some sort of identity to sort of have to like tie you down to a certain identity and to give them some solidarity. Of course, for some people, they don't want to be tied down, and that's up to them. And I 100% support it. I just think that for some people, race could be something that's important. So in that sense, that race shouldn't be completely taken out of everything. I think it's an option, but for some people, it could be an option, but not necessarily the right option for everyone.
Yeah, I agree with both of what you said. And I want to think of it as in the future, we should be able to ignore race, but not ignore it. So to be able to ignore it to the point where we can all work together and respect each other, but not ignore it to the point where we can be like, whoa, you're from da da da, that's so cool, I want to learn more. Or like, whoa, you lived there, da da da, I want to learn more. And be able to respect each other and learn more instead of saying, whoa, you're from there, why are you here then? Why are you doing this? You shouldn't be here. But instead be able to connect and learn more.
Yeah, I think it's like, I completely agree with what you said, Tanishka, like the destigmatization of race, like it's just like, oh, okay, you're this race, like, and it's like, that's like kind of it, it's not like, it doesn't lead to stereotypes and it doesn't lead to like a certain mindset, it's just like, okay, that's part of who you are, but that's not entirely who you are. Yeah.
I was listening to all of you talking. I just find it so amazing that there's so many people, and this feels like a lot of people, like agreeing about these things. I mean, obviously, like discussions, we're all allowed to have different opinions, but I can just see that all of you have like so much respect for the topic and so much respect for other people. I don't know. I kind of really love this group, so just wanted to say that. Yeah.
Alila or Taisei, do you guys have any thoughts regarding this topic or this question, or do we want to move on to another question?
Like being different from someone isn't like a bad thing, right? But someone somehow thought it is, and like few percent of the population thinks that being different from someone is a bad thing, and we have to like change that in our generation, right? Because the people older than us is like literally not all of them, but like there's a fact that people are discriminating those who are different from others. So I think that we just have to change that idea, like those mindset. Yeah, that's our kind of like mission to live on. And I think that's like really, really important.
So thank you for leading us into the next question, Taisei. How do we realize that ideal society? And how do we get to that point where it's like race isn't, deciding factor, and it's no longer regarded as an issue, but still an important aspect of each person, I guess, or not an important, but still is like an aspect.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. I think the way to start a change is, I think a big part of this is education, how we are educated, how we choose to educate further generations. And I think also a very important part of this is making sure that what happens in our society, whether they're bad or good things, is that even those bad things are passed on to future generations, the knowledge, because ultimately the only way to learn how to get out of these troubles with racial discrimination, for example, is to learn from our mistakes, learn what's happening in society. And I think a lot of that is happening now, especially in the United States, a lot of newsline about race that's all coming to surface. And I would say probably 50 years ago, these things would be unheard of, right? So I think that's a big change I already see in our current society, is that these issues are being brought to awareness.
I'd like to add on that, and I think awareness is a really key point. I think one issue that comes with race, the racism aspect of race, is I think it comes from a lot of stereotyping, looking at someone and thinking, oh, they're from there, they have this kind of background, they must be this kind of person, when we're totally like, each person has their own personality and own identity. And I think that stereotyping is a huge issue when it comes to race. I think that's one of the major issues, and to get more people to understand that being from a certain race or being a certain race doesn't mean that they have a certain personality or it determines who they are. And I think this sort of discussions is really important, to be able to talk about it, to be able to try to communicate ideas across racial lines would be amazing. But I think part of the issue is a lot of these discussions take place, like here today, we're doing a discussion, but the people who have those stereotypes, such as, this might be just my opinion, but I think a lot of the Midwestern Americans, sort of the rednecks or that area, have a lot of stereotypes and not enough other people from different races who don't fit a certain stereotype that can talk with them. Because I think if they get to know a certain race or a certain person from a race, they'll realize that it's totally, race doesn't determine who you are, or religion doesn't determine who you are. And I think discussions across those different races is more important than anything, I think, to educate each other about. And I think education, even in the educational systems, we can have discussions in our classes, but if we don't have someone to represent that certain race or someone from that race to tell us what it's like to be part of that race, we can't fully understand it. So I think it's really important to be able to get more people together to talk about it.
Yeah, I think you brought up a good point, where it's kind of like how there's almost like, how do we get people interested in this topic to begin with? Because if you don't have any experiences where you interact with people of a different race, or you learn, if you don't ever learn about it, then like how do you get people to actually care and want to change? Because I think part of the reason why we're all here in this discussion today is because we've had experiences and we feel it's like this topic is relevant in our lives. But I think a lot of people in the world like don't really see the necessity to change because they're like, well, it doesn't affect my immediate surroundings, so why should I care? And I think that like that's something that education can change. But I think even that, it's like, it's not just like a teacher telling you, like, okay, like racism is bad. I think it's important to like explore collectively, like explore the concept of race and like culture and identity like we are today. But even then, like you said, Kay, it's hard to do that when you live in a place where everyone's the same, like everyone is, the same and everyone has the same ideas. It's interesting because there's different people and you learn new things because there's different people. So I think it's like, how do we get more people to interact with each other? But then the issue is that a lot of the people who are in those places where they don't have a lot of interactions, like that's where the most racism is. And so they're like, oh, I don't want to interact with other people, like people of different races. So like, how do we convince them to to actually care and to be interested?
I think one thing that I want to be able to try is have discussions with the teachers instead of the teachers telling us information or telling us what they know, and or like even including our parents, because in my case, my mom is fully Japanese, and even though she has lived here, she's lived in Japan more, and so she's Japanese. And so I think including people like my mom in these conversations where her kid is a part of these kind of environment would be a big step, because we would be able to hear why these issues are going on within their generation, and then their generation would be able to hear what we think and what we are feeling and what we've been going through, I guess. And so they would be able to understand what exactly is going on and what exactly is a problem, and they would also be able to help to make it better instead of just them telling us what to do and us trying to just push it all away.
Yeah, well, I think generally, since we're talking about the education aspect of it as well, I think generally people just have a fear of the unknown. I think that's something we've established. But I also think that that fear, it comes from a lot of ignorance behind it. People don't know, enough about what they're actually, showing that fear for. I mean, they find something or someone scary just because they don't know enough about them. They think that being different from a certain person, needs to create some sort of a distance when it actually doesn't. And, like Kay said, when you're in an environment where everyone's the same and there's no hope for finding a different opinion or a different type of person, then you kind of get stuck into that, you know, mentality of everyone needs to be the same, or difference is bad, or, you know, the unknown is something to fear. And that's definitely not true. And, you know, if we're talking about education, I've always thought that we need to like integrate a bit more multiculturalism into each and every classroom. I've grown up in Japan, so I've seen the way that it's done. And I wouldn't say that they're not trying, because I have seen a lot of different like English classes where they try to, you know, integrate different cultures and all that. But I also think that it's taking a lot longer than it should. You know, it's not only, you know, in Japan, I feel like 10 years ago when I was like 5 or 6 years old, the only countries that my friends knew was America. Like that's all they could say. Like a foreigner to them was Amerikajin, which means like American. And that just shows that they didn't have a good enough education from their parents or from their surroundings to know that there are other countries in the world, you know? So, I mean, and in terms of race, people aren't born racist. They learn those things from the people that they surround themselves with. The environment shapes them in a way that makes them think, you know, a different race is something they need to fear. So just my main idea would be classrooms, they need to integrate a lot more multiculturalism. And we need to make sure that, you know, those pure innocent children that are born, they don't end up becoming, you know, racists in the future just because of a really bad environment. Yeah, that's what I think.
I really think that the environment changes us, because when I was like, I don't know, second grade in elementary, I was in Japan and I knew nothing about those foreign countries. And then I moved to Hawaii. And then like 2 years, maybe like around 2 years in Hawaii, my mindset like literally changed 180 degrees. And I just knew that there are a lot of type of race and they're not different from us, like literally, like just maybe the skin color, just that. And there's like nothing wrong about them and there's nothing bad about them. And it's like, I just knew that we are all the same. Like we all have like the best mindset we could have. I don't know what I'm saying, but like I just want to say that we're all the same, and like the environment changes us, and that is why I'm like interested in race. So I want to thank my parents for bringing me to Hawaii. That's just, yeah, environment.
I just wanted to go back to what Misa said a little earlier about like educating like older generations. And I hadn't really thought about it before, but like I'm starting to now question like, is there even like meaning, or is it more important to educate older generations or the younger generation? Because like as I was thinking about it when you guys were talking, I'm like, wait a minute, like the older generation, like yes, right now they are in power, but I think it's a lot harder to change the mindset of older people than it is to change the mindset of younger people. And like, okay, like, well, older people are in power now and like they're making decisions now, but sooner or later, these younger people are going to like be in those positions. And so I feel like while it is important to like balance our efforts, perhaps would be more useful to try to like educate the younger generation, just because, you know, and like even and not just our younger generation, but like our generation too, because like sooner or later, you know, our generation is going to have children. And so, you know, it's like the generation above us like already has children, and so that's our generation, if like you get what I'm trying to say. So if we educate from our generation and below, then I feel like that's where we get the most change. I don't know, what do you guys think? I'm not sure if I was like totally coherent on that, but
yeah, I hear you, and I do agree, but I think that we're still growing, and our generation, we may have the power later on, but from now to the time where we do have that power, we still are learning a lot. And so if we learn all these racism and all this, the same concept that we've been learning from the adults, I don't think anything's going to change, because this generation is going to turn into the older generation now. And so I think we should focus more on educating the younger generation from us below. But I think we can't forget about the older generation, because they still are teaching us, even if we do have kids, and they still are going to be in power because, well, from my Japanese, I guess, thinking, because there are elders, we can't completely disrespect them. And so we should let them in on our discussions, and so that they can change maybe even a little bit, so that they would help our next generations to not become like them.
Yeah, I don't think we should like disregard them and just like completely shove them aside. I think they're still, like they're still members of society, and so we should still include them. But I just feel like it's just a lot more work, it's just harder to change older generations, especially when older generations think, okay, well, you guys don't know stuff, or it's different with you guys. And so I think that's just why, if it's like 60% going towards younger generations and like 40% like our efforts, I think just kind of like, where do we get that balance?
Yeah, I think a balance with how we educate certain people is definitely needed, but also the fact that maybe we're like dividing it a bit too much, in the sense that, we're all living in the same society at the same time. And sure, we've seen things, or maybe haven't seen things in the past, and that's different. But if we could like educate the older generations and the younger generations together, like in the same way, so that we can all see the same picture. I know this is a really like, I don't know how to say, like I'm looking at the big picture of it too much, but if we could educate both the generations in a similar way, I feel like maybe that would, cause the most progress, I guess. Because, like you said, the older generations, they have the power now, but in 20 or 30 years, our generation is going to have that, that power, right? But at that point, there's going to be another young generation that we need to educate, and where the attention is going to go to them. So that's going to keep changing. And we can't keep changing our focus from one generation to the other. Like, we don't have enough people. And so we have like 7 billion people on Earth, but it's still not going to be enough. So I mean, like discussions like these, like this Zoom discussion we're doing right now, if these kind of discussions can happen, but with more generations involved, I would feel like that's the ideal way of doing things, because, we could have different people with different opinions seeing the same thing. Yeah, hope that made sense. Yeah.
So this is a slightly off, a little bit off topic, but I've seen these YouTube videos online by a YouTube channel called Jubilee. I don't know if you're familiar, but it's an amazing YouTube channel in my opinion. What they do is they get together like 2 or more groups or of people who identify with a certain group, like in terms of sexuality, gender, or political stance, or generation, or race. They get like 2 groups of people together, like 3 or so people from each group, and they have discussions. And I think that's an amazing thing that's happening, and it's on a major YouTube channel, and I think that's amazing. And I think those are the kind of things that should be happening more often. I definitely agree with the more discussions idea, or I think it just should happen. How hard is it to talk about what you believe in or what you think is true? Because when you talk about it, you might find out, well, what you thought was true might not be the way the world works, or it's not the same as someone else. There's another opinion. That other opinion is what a lot of people just don't understand, I think. And that's why, especially when it comes to education, I think being able to, I think it might have been Tanishka who brought it up, multicultural education. But being able to bring in multiple perspectives into the education is probably one of the most important things in terms of being able to understand or to come to bring, I think the original question was ideal society, and where we can all accept one another for who they are and have free opinion. So I think definitely discussion within education about multicultural, in a multicultural way, is probably one of the most important things that we can do. And definitely educate both generations together is definitely going to work better, because if the older generation understands a new concept, they can teach that to the younger generation. If the younger generation, well, we have social media, we'll spread it. If we learn something that we care about and think is necessary for other people to know about, awareness or be aware of, then we'll spread it on social media. So definitely it's important to educate both older generations and younger generations together, I think. Sorry to be so long.
Like, I don't know if like any of you guys have experienced it, but like I think that it's like, if we can get older generation, like people from the older generation who are willing to listen to us, then I think it's, you know, it's like, then why not? You know, why wouldn't we talk to them? But I think like I've had a lot of experiences where it's just like I try to say something, but I'm like immediately shut down, or like they just don't really care, or they're just like, okay, well, you guys fix it. And then it's like, thanks, you know? And so I think that's where like I get kind of discouraged, and like once I do kind of get shut down by an older like person, then I like can't, you know, I get discouraged, and like I'm like, okay, then like why don't you just maintain that, you know, like I don't really want to like fight with you, like I don't want to argue with you about that topic, because it's like, you know, I don't want to be disrespectful, but it's like hard to like, I feel like as soon as I share my opinion, then I'm more like automatically seen as disrespectful, like in a lot of like situations. So I think that's where it gets kind of challenging, like because a lot of older people, I feel like, don't really want to listen to us. But if we can get people who do, then of course we should involve them.
I think I really know what you mean. I've had my experiences with that as well. It's just, it's so hard because when you try to state your opinion, they kind of disregard it without giving you a valid reason for it. You know, they're just like, well, not now, or something like that, you know? It's like, if not now, then when? I really understand what you mean. And I've noticed that if there's like a middleman, like someone to kind of clear the tension, then it works a bit better. I mean, there's still like majority of the population, I feel like, still needs to learn how to respect opinions of the younger generation, and so does the younger generation. We need to learn to respect the old generations as well. But someone to be in the middle to make sure both sides get to state their opinions properly is very important, I've learned, because then there's no stopping either side. You know, if it becomes close to a fight, there's someone to stop that. But both sides can always say their opinions. So I get what you mean, Solana. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with both of you, because my mom has gotten a lot better, but if I were to have a similar conversation a couple of years ago, she would be like, だって私日本人だもん. She'd be like, but I'm Japanese and should just disregard the whole conversation and we wouldn't be able to have a conversation. And even with some of my friends, I have a friend that's completely white, and I would try to have these conversations with her, and then she would just be like, oh, well, I don't know. And we would just move on to some random thing. And so I think it's a little harder to be able to push this conversation because either you're being disrespectful or either it just won't be productive. But I think we need to be able to push these conversations and be uncomfortable yet have a productive conversation in order to make any moves or make any changes.
I'll add a little bit onto that. So I think personally when this happens, I would say this actually happens quite frequently, is that, I don't know if it's like a parent, for example, that even asks for my opinion, then I give my opinion and then it's like, oh, are you talking back to me, right? And then then I simply say, no, I'm stating my opinion on this topic and you did ask for my opinion. And I think at that point, I'm just filled with emotions like frustration and I guess also just disappointed that I couldn't get my point across. So ultimately, the question is, how do we get this point across? How do we get people to understand that that opinions of all generations are important, right?
I think it's like, so, like the UN video of like Greta Thunberg, like blasting world leaders. I completely agree with what she's saying, but sometimes I'm like, okay, is she a little too extreme? Like, could she have possibly said it in a nicer way? Like, did she really have to like be so harsh on world leaders? But then at the same time, it's like, it's such an important topic that maybe if she didn't use that language, then like they wouldn't listen to her at all. But then the flip side of that, it's like, okay, well, some people, like you said, Alila, when you get emotional, it's hard to have a productive conversation. All you can think about is like those emotions. And so you kind of like completely shut off what you're trying to say. So it's like, that's also kind of difficult, like the way you deliver what you're trying to say.
I find it interesting that Greta can be such a controversial topic. Like I've been speaking to my friends about her a lot, and opinions really differ because some people agree with her passion and her drive to actually, get adults to listen. But then some people believe that there are other ways to do it, like her protest, her march, like all the activism that she's doing, the way she's trying to spread the word is incredible, but the manner with which she tries to convey that message can be kind of controversial. I agree with that. Like, I mean, for the past few years, I've been debating at my school, like debate club and things like that. And through that, I feel like I've gotten a bit better at arguing with my parents. Like Ellie, maybe you would kind of agree with that, like stating your opinion in a more clear way. I mean, I'm not saying everyone should join debate club, but learning how to kind of construct your arguments in a way that people know that you're serious about it, but at the same time know that you're trying to be respectful, to them is also maybe really important. Like educating people on ways to convey the message might also be an important part of all this.
Kind of building on that, when you said debate club, I think that's an amazing thing that, of course, not everyone needs to do it, but it's an amazing chance to talk to someone without, well, one of the things I was told when I took a class on doing debates is your arguments should always be about the topic and not about the person you're debating. And I think that's that key point about being a good debater in even a graded debate is that you're not disrespecting someone by disagreeing with them, or by telling someone that their stance on a certain issue is wrong. You're not attacking that person, you're attacking that idea more when you're debating. And I think that's one of the big issues when it comes to talking with your parents or talking with your grandparents about politics or race is that they think when you disagree with them that, and you tell them you're wrong, they are wrong, or you think that they are wrong, they take it as disrespect, or they don't want to admit that they were wrong or had slightly a misguided opinion. They want to be right. They're older than you, they know more than you, they've lived longer, and they know more. That's sort of the way they approach it. They don't see it from us. We feel like we know more about a certain topic sometimes, and we talk to them about that, but they don't see us as equal. When we're talking to them as human, they don't see us as equal. Or the younger generation, well, they don't know much. They're still in school. They're still learning. Well, about a certain issue, we might know more than that person. And I think that that possibility that a younger person might know more than you is kind of threatening to some people. That someone else knows something better than you is sort of a threatening or scary idea. But when it comes to debate club, that's accepted. The other person might know more about it, and you have to accept that debate. And I think that's another mentality part that some people need to embrace. And I think if it's hard to do that in a debate or a discussion in your house, join a debate club or watch videos of debates taking place, because it really shows that your opinion on something isn't a personal attack on the other person or saying that they are not as good a person because they didn't know or because they had a different opinion.
Like, just to add to that, it should be admitting your defeats and like saying that, okay, I didn't know before, should be normalized. And I was just wondering, like, is generationism a term? Because I feel like, including myself, I definitely sometimes do that. Like, and I feel like a lot of other generations, like, we discriminate against each other. You know, it's like, oh, millennials, or like, you know, boomers and stuff like that. And I think, but I feel like that's also such an American concept. Like in Japan, like you don't have these, like there's generations, but like you don't have like names that you assign generations. And I don't know about in different cultures, like in Germany, Levi, do you have like a name for this generation, a name for that generation?
I would, when you said like just like that, it's like America very much focuses on that. I would definitely agree with that. I would say that there is, I wouldn't say a strict division, but there is a definite like division of generations in Germany, and like you can also tell like by the way they interact with each other too. If this person, I guess, belongs to a certain generation. Also, if I were to interact with someone from a different generation, it would be very different from me interacting with someone in my generation, right? But of the certain placing people into the groups and like, you know, using names, I wouldn't say that that's necessarily a thing in Germany. No.
What about in India? I'm just curious.
To be honest, I don't think I know enough to be able to answer that. Sorry.
I don't know if we can connect this to the topic, but I think that the concept of respect should be more explored, because I feel like having these discussions, older generations should be able to respect us and respect that we might have done our research and we might have been learning all this new information. And we should be able to respect that the older generations have lived longer and have had more experiences. And so they have more information to be able to have a mature discussion. Because I feel like if my mom was teaching me about cooking, then yeah, she would probably be right because she's been doing it a lot longer and she can cook a lot better. But if I were to have a discussion about like this kind of discussion about like race or nationality, I would have enough information to be able to have a mature discussion with her. And so I think being able to respect and being able to understand that we also can do our own research and have our own information instead of thinking that we're just on our phones, on social media, not doing anything and not having any actual facts or information.
I mean, like, there are people that can't accept those new information from the younger generations, but I think that not all of them are like that. So I think that it's just like so important to find a person who can respect each other, like respect other generations, and that could lead to spreading new information and like new mindset and opinions about race. Yeah, so I think it's really important to find those who can accept their feelings and respect each other.
Taisei, like adding on to your idea of like finding one person or, you know, a couple people in an older generation, I think that's a good tactic, because if you express your feelings to, you know, a couple older people, then they, you know, might share it to their friends in that same generation. And I think it's a lot easier for older people to hear stuff and to, you know, take in stuff from their same generation than to hear it from us. And I think that's just like, I think that's universal. Like, I think our generation too, like, you know, I would rather hear something from my friend than from my sister, you know, like from my younger sister, because it's just that sense of pride that we all have as a human. So I think like when we're thinking about spreading our message, then yeah, maybe it is good if we like find the people that will listen and find the people, you know, that do care, and then it just in hopes that those people will share it within their own generation.
Okay, I'll just add like a tiny bit onto that. I think a great way to start there is with family. I speak from personal experience because I've had my grandpa, for example, he said some things where I disagree with what he said, and he says them not simply out of ignorance, but just because as he grew up, that's kind of what he was taught. And I know when I give my opinion to him, he is actually going to listen to it because he loves me, he respects me as a human being, and he is not simply gonna yell at me or ignore me. I know that even if he at that point is like, no, I don't agree with that, I know that he will review what I told him and maybe the next time not say that again, think about even what's currently happening and understand that I also am living in the current society just from a different perspective as a much younger person, and he'll just, I just think starting with your family and then they branch out into their own generations, that's definitely a way to start.
I also like Taisei's idea of going to a couple people at once, because I think one of the reasons why it's hard for the older generation to hear us could be that from peer pressure, because if it was just one person from our generation and a group of people from the older generation having a discussion, there's going to be a lot of older generation people that disagree, and the people around them might feel like that if they agree with our generation, they would be, I guess, like secluded or just, I guess, disrespected by them. And so I feel like having a one-on-one conversation would be a lot more productive than us going to a group of older generation people.
I totally agree that we should be like, it's definitely effective to be able to like get one person from an older generation and talk with them and then have them spread it. But at the same time, I think part of the another issue that comes up when talking to the older generation that I don't think has been mentioned yet is difference in media. This is for it. What I have in mind right now is strictly about America, and Fox News being a conservative network that's informing a certain group, a certain demographic of people, and telling them that the other side is invalid. It's not a real opinion. They're lying. They're making things up. That's what they are being told. And with such media informing the population of that the other side is a lie, no matter what we say, that generation won't be able to accept what we have to say. And I think that's an issue. It might be a little bit separate from race, but I think it is kind of tied in with race. It's just my impression that I have of Fox being very white nationalist in America. And sort of there are some white nationalist media that tell lies about Democratic Party, as well as saying that, yeah, I think I don't know if you guys can kind of understand what I'm trying to say, but it's sort of the media that the older generation consumes might be telling them something that's contradicting with our points that we're trying to get across, and that might be another barrier that we are having to face even now, and probably more in the future as well. And I want to know if you have any opinions on media, I guess.
In terms of, sorry, Solana. Okay. Yeah, I understand what you mean. For what the media decides to show people, it's really different depending on the country, depending on the region, depending on political or cultural, religious views of the people who have that power to decide what citizens get to see. But I think a different form, I don't know if you would consider this media, I guess it's connected more to education, but textbooks, right? So like history textbooks, the way they portray certain events that have happened in history can differ depending on which country you read those textbooks in. So a good example of this would be World War II, or the Pearl Harbor bombing, or the atomic bombs that were dropped in Japan. I mean, if you read the textbooks in Japan, you can just see that it is definitely very single-sided. It's a one-sided story. And of course, I understand that because it was a tragic incident that happened in Japan. I'm not saying anything against that, but at the same time, the way these events are portrayed, if it differs so much depending on where you read it or where you, get that information from, then I feel like that itself can be a cause for a lot of discrimination in the future. Like, if they did the same thing with race, if the media, if TV, radio, all that, if they portrayed race in a way that makes people fear other races, then that itself is going to cause discrimination. Like if one day NHK, it's like the main broadcasting place in Japan, if they started saying that one race is bad, and then if they started saying that every day, the influence it would have on people, I mean, it's unbelievable that media can differ just because of one person's opinion or because of one group's opinion. And like you said, Kate, it's I don't know, it's not only like TV or radio or textbooks, it can be anything. It can be social media too. Like that's for our generation, it's a big form of media. So if we want to get our ideal society that respects race a bit more, that can have respectful discussions between different generations, I think the way things are portrayed in different forms of media needs to be reevaluated more often. Yeah.
I think I think another thing is that with like the rise of the internet and social media and just the ability for anyone to create content, and just like the sheer mass of media in our world right now, it's very easy for each person to like, let's just say with like, as an example, like Instagram, like I don't want to hear about like what Fox News has to say, and I don't want to hear about like what white supremacists have to say and stuff like that. Like I don't want to, like, to be honest, like I don't really want to hear about that. And so if I just follow, like, and as an example, like if I just follow a bunch of like liberal, like environmentalist, anti-racist accounts and stuff, then I've completely like filtered out, like I've created my own world of media where I can only like learn about that perspective. And so while I don't think that, the opinions of like white supremacists and stuff, like I don't think they are correct, but it's like if everyone does that, and if everyone just curates, the media that they consume, then it creates an even bigger divide. And it just makes it even harder for people to understand each other and to like reach mutual understanding, because everyone is consuming different media and everyone is like just like they get to like, I don't know how to word this, but like it's like their own bubble of media, and it's like they can just hear what they want to hear and they don't have to hear about the other side. And it's just so easy to do that now because there's just so many ways to do it.
I 100% agree with you there, Solana. That's totally happening. And I don't think that it's just a matter of what we choose to see. As long as if we decide to choose Fox News or some other conservative networks, we probably can. But one issue is that Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, these algorithms have specific coding so that it shows us content that we want to see or that we agree with. The algorithm itself is made in a way that is dividing us. And I think that's another issue. It was really well highlighted in a Netflix documentary called The Social Dilemma. I don't know if any of you have watched it, but it's a very good documentary, and it shows, it definitely shows how social media has created this way of division. And I definitely think there was another example of this is I, of course, scroll through Instagram like every day, and people repost TikToks, and I see that, and I think that's some of them are funny. But then the other day I came across a YouTube video that was sort of, I think it was highlighting, I can't remember what the video was about, but it mentioned how TikToks have been in 2020, and they showed this TikTok of a girl, white girl, preaching about Christianity, and this is the end of the world, or this is Jesus is going to come save us. She was talking like a preacher, like an evangelical preacher. And I have never seen a TikTok like that. It has never been recommended to me. So the algorithms are completely manipulated so that we don't see what we don't want to see. Obviously, if I had seen that, I would have been very dismissive of it. I'm not a Christian. I would have not liked it and scrolled past it. But at the same time, I would have known that it exists. I would have known that that is an opinion in society. And I think that that's a problem, especially with social media, that we're not learning enough about the other side. We don't know enough of, we think we know the other side well enough to debate them, but we don't really know if we know it well enough, because we're not accessing every single bit of information, because it's such a vast wealth of information that's on the internet. And I think that's an issue that is very hard to sort of resolve, because I think that's probably where Instagram, Facebook, and social media makes a lot of their profit as well. So yeah, I definitely think that it's definitely a way to move forward in the world is to follow controversial accounts. And if your friends ask you about it, just say, well, I'm doing it to inform myself. And I think that's kind of important, but I haven't done it yet, so I'll have to do that tonight.
Yeah, it's hard because you don't want to support, like you don't like if like I don't know, I don't think this is how social media works, but like if my follow of like some controversial, account like gets them money, like I don't want to support them, like I don't want to support their cause, but I do still want to learn, about what they have to say. And with that, I'm really disappointed to say that we're out of time according to the time schedule. It's been really, really interesting talking with everyone. We kind of like went off race, but I think in a way it's all sort of connected because we live in a society.